and move along to presentations. And due to the circumstances, I've talked to both of them, and I've asked Mr. Slagel to go ahead and come on first. He's traveled out of town, and then we'll follow up with next with Nick Hawks and his presentations. So, Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the invitation. I made a presentation to the High Country Council of Governments a couple of weeks ago, or almost a month ago, I guess, Mark. And I think, Michael, you shared some of that information with your board members, but I just wanted to follow up based on some of the comments that we've received about that, just to share some additional information. And I manage the Northwest Prosperity Zone for the North Carolina Department of Commerce and the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina. And we like to give annual updates every so often. And recently we published findings at EDPNC on what local activity looked like for economic development activities throughout the state. And this included business recruitment, business expansions, small business inquiries, things like that. And what we found was that business is pretty good in North Carolina. And there's a lot of folks from outside the state of North Carolina that want to come and do business here. So what does that mean to us? That means in order for us to host those people or to recruit those people or to look at the expansions that existing industry have, we need to be able to make those expansions come to pass, or those business recruitment projects come to be. And so, you know, we hear that there's a large urban and rural divide in the state of North Carolina, and hopefully that's being addressed. But in small counties like Allegheny and some of the others that I work, economic development can be a challenge. But there's hope, and most of that hope is based on the fact that if we do a good job of taking care of what we have in place today, then growth and expansions are going to come through the existing industry. Everybody wants to be able to put a new industry up on the hill and say, here's 150 new jobs. Well, that's tough. There's over 3,000 counties in the United States, and there's over 35 towns and communities trying to do the same thing that we're doing. So it's an extremely competitive position to be in. But what we're finding is there's a lot of reasons for companies to expand and to locate in North Carolina. The corporate tax rate is attractive. The work ethic of the individuals is very, very positive. But when we looked at the projects that took place in the Northwest Prosperity Zone over the last 18 months, what we found was that we increased by about 1,200 new jobs, and the total amount of business recruitment and expansion projects was near $300 million. So we wanted to dig just a little bit deeper and see where that growth had come, what were the common denominators that had been experienced in those communities. So looking back, the four that we found was the first being, and this is the first question that we hear from companies when we sit with them, whether they're expanding or whether they're looking to come to the community as a new business, is what have you done to develop your workforce? That is the key component, because in our workplaces today, and we're a heavily dominated manufacturing area. We make things here. You look at the furniture industry, you look at the textile industry, you look at the aerospace industry, aviation industry, things like that. We have a lot of advanced manufacturing within these 12 counties. So that is the number one question, is what are you doing on a local level to develop your workforce? Because honestly, there is a graying of the workforce in some of these manufacturing facilities. How do you backfill that person that's been there 30 years with the same skills that you need going forward? That's a concern. So the communications that we have with our community colleges is critical. And we have one of the best community college systems in the United States, maybe the best. And so developing a strategy for that workforce pipeline is absolutely key to keeping the industries that you have in place and potentially recruiting new industry. The second thing we found was, what kind of real estate holdings do you have? Most of the companies that are either looking to expand out of their existing facility or locate in your community, most of them want to move into an existing facility. You know, that's tough. The mountain counties are challenged from a geography perspective and a topography perspective. It's hard to get 5 or 10 acres of flat land. You know, it is what it is. And then if you do find it, the cost the site development is sometimes cost prohibitive. You know, it's expensive. So what we're finding from a real estate perspective is companies like to have a site that is developed or a building that is ready to be altered to meet their needs. High ceilings is a key. You know, anything from 28 to 34 feet is what most people are asking for. But what's encouraging out of the findings is, you know, you think you have to have 50, 60, 70, 80,000 square feet, and those are all great. We need those. But about a third of the respondents found that if they had 25 to 30,000 square feet, it's a good place to start, which I think is encouraging for the small counties, because it doesn't take a whole lot of site preparation and land development to do a 30,000 square foot building. So we're encouraged about that. The third thing that we saw was the need for positive community development. Community development is just as important to economic development as anything else. And again, economic development is competitive. And if your community is not reinvesting in itself, it says something to the companies that are there. It also says something to the companies that may want to come to your community. So reinvestment into the local community through community development is extremely important and valuable. And then finally, you can do all of those things, but how do you sustain it? Because you don't want to be a flash in the pan. You want sustainable economic development growth. And it's important to go tell your story. And the marketing strategies have become more and more and more important to communities that are continuing to experience success. So I went back and I looked at these four common denominators and looked at some of the communities that had experienced this kind of success in these four different categories. And all of these things were present with a long-term strategy within their economic development strategy. You look at downtown revitalization in the town of West Jefferson. Maybe the poster child for the state of North Carolina. Small mountain county, small mountain town. You look at the town of Bakersville. They've done just a fabulous job. And they're heavily dependent on local government, so they don't get a lot of tax revenue from the county courthouse, from the jail, from the DSS services and things like that. But Mayor Vines over there has done an excellent job in promoting his little town at the base of the Rome Mountain. Also, I think if you look at the city of Marion, you know, they were a recent Main Street Award winner. And so there's just story after story of economic development promise through community development that have made all of these communities successful. And so that's kind of the synopsis of where we're at. And I wanted to share that with you because I think Michael has shared the complete package of findings. So that's kind of where we're at. I'm encouraged about what's going on in the rural areas of the part of the state that I work, because we are seeing a lot of activity. But I think communities that are prepared for economic development are the ones that are going to experience success in economic development. Because you're never standing still. You're either moving forward or you're moving back. The only thing that's constant in this world is change. It's constantly changing. And the same's true in economic development, is that we continue to see reinvestment into the communities by the local government authorities, and it's paying off. It's paying off through the activity that they're seeing through reinvestment dollars. And again, if we can broaden the tax base, then that relieves the pressure on the local taxpayer. If we can increase the business communities, redevelopment dollars, increase the development dollars in general, that helps the local taxpayer. And so to this gentleman's comments a few minutes ago, that's great. He sold 10 houses. That's what you want to see, is reinvestment into the local community from private and public sector. So I'll stop right there and ask if there's any questions, and be mindful of your situation and your time. Be glad to come back at some point. But thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the invitation.
You're welcome. And at this time, does anybody have any questions for Bill?
Thank you, sir. Very enlightening.
The community development, reinvesting in the community and the development part, can you expound on that? What types of developments are being made? I mean, and here, there's a discussion about giving Main Street a facelift, I'll call it that. We call it streetscape. Of course, at the very least, we need a resurfaced Main Street. But what, other than, those types of projects, are there other investments that some of these communities are making that are having success that you
I
can
think
think of?
anytime you can make an investment into your educational system for your young folks, I think that's because if you look at the robotics that's being used, the automation that's being used in the industry today, whether it's mechatronics, robotics, anytime you can have some kind of advanced manufacturing facility that teaches those skills through your community college, and it doesn't have to be a big space, but that shows existing industry that, hey, we're going to invest in our young folks, because it's not uncommon for kids where they come out of Allegheny High or any of the other high schools, a lot of them leave and never come back, and I think we all experience that. So letting those folks know, or letting those students know that, hey, you can make a good living and live in Allegheny County, and my drive home is 3 minutes at the end of the day, whereas I have a daughter that lives in Atlanta. Her husband gets off, and it's an hour and a half, and he goes 7 miles. A lot of people don't want to be in that concrete jungle. And so reinvestment into the community from an educational perspective, I think, is extremely important with training. And you have a wonderful community college here through Wilkes Community College. So leverage them, as much as you can, because that's part of what industry is looking for. The other thing is try to be in one mind and one accord as much from a unity perspective. Companies don't like conflict. They don't like uncertainty. They like to see a strategic plan that's in place for local government. Now, we all know everybody's going to disagree from time to time, but the key is having that reinvestment into that local community and having a unified stance on it as much as possible. And sometimes, it's hard to do that. The other thing I would say, there's a lot of good plans sitting on people's shelves in local government and state government today. But if you don't implement what you're thinking about doing, it's nothing more than just words on paper. So, we prepare, we cast vision, we plan, we manage, we organize. Sometimes we even finance things. But if we don't implement our community development perspective or our workforce development strategy or our marketing strategy, implementation is the key to good business management and best practices. So, Mr. Chairman, those are three things that come to mind, is making sure that once a governance policy is established, seeing it through, because I do believe there's a lot of positive that we never see from people that come through our community, because we don't know sometimes who's walking the street. And if they have a good perception of our communities, they may come and do business. But if they see that we're not doing anything, then it can work against us. Sometimes it does hurt us when we don't know what we don't know, And so I think your marketing strategy of authentically Allegheny is a good start. And I applaud those that put that together. But you have to tell your story in all of these areas. That's the key, and you have to implement it.
Anyone else? Like any? Thank you for your time.
Safe
your
travels,
information.
sir.
We
Be
may
blessed.
may
Safe
be
travels.
hollering at you.